Welcome back. We're staying with the Thabo Bester story, and of course the paper trail or lack thereof behind him in terms of identification has been a key issue. He himself, in fact, raised the issue of an ID number through his lawyer in court earlier today. Now, Home Affairs Minister Dr. Motsoaledi earlier revealed that it was his department which was able to verify Thabo Bester's identity, which, as indicated, has been the subject of much debate, especially in Parliament over the last 2 days. But what has been puzzling from the minister's address earlier is that Bester was never officially registered as a South African citizen. Minister Motsoaledi has kindly joined us here in studio to try and understand what has been going on. Minister, it's clear you've had to do a lot of digging to try and get records of Thabo Bester. Just remind us what you found.
Yeah, indeed. Look, let me start here. You said Thabo was not registered as a South African citizen. He was not registered as any citizen, not only South African, because we have got 3 databases in Home Affairs. We have got the National Population Register that registered birth, death, marriage, ID, passport for any South African citizen. But we also have got the system called NIIS, National Immigration Information System, that registered refugees and asylum seekers. That means those who made their presence known in the country, they will be registered in that system. Unfortunately, it does not register birth, death, and marriage amongst them. The last system is called VAS, or Visa Adjudication System, VAS. It registered anybody who is here through a visa or a permit, and I'm sure you know we've got 17 of them. Now, Thabo Bester doesn't appear in any one of those.
Or not this Thabo Bester, because you found 2 others, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there are 2 other Thabo Besters. One is 19 years old, clearly not the subject of this matter. The other is 40 years old. We visited him. He stays in Ratanda. And when we arrived there, we found that he has already presented himself to the police and said, I heard over the radio that a Thabo Bester is being wanted by police. Here I am. They checked everything and they found that no. Even when he appeared, they realized that this is not the person who escaped from jail, and so they released him. And we also met him. He's there in the National Population Register. He was registered long ago when he was born. So the question was now, who's Thabo Bester? While we're still stuck on that, because we're concluding the only explanation is that he's an illegal immigrant who never registered anywhere. Then the mother came on the scene and said, no, but he's my child. I gave birth to him on the 13th of June in 1986 at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital. We actually tracked to that hospital. In their archives of 37 years ago, there he is in the records of the labor ward where he was born and registered as Thabo Bester, given birth to by Macy Bester, Macy being Thabo's mother's name, who is now Mabaso, but she was Bester at that time. And then she further told us that, look, this child of mine attended school. She gave us the name of the school, Davitheron, in the south of Johannesburg. And we went there, and indeed, we found that on the 14th of January, 1997, he was 11 years when he started school. He went to register there, and there was no ID, but they registered him with the date of birth, which corresponds clearly with the date of birth at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, the 13th of June, 1986.
Yeah. I mean, it is remarkable, Minister, that someone who is in their late 30s, he must be, 37 years old, has navigated life in South Africa, never mind the fact that he's a criminal and he's a convicted rapist, but has navigated life in South Africa without an ID. Are you confident that he hasn't been using other IDs with other identities in order to do things like open bank accounts, to maybe even vote, to do the usual administrative things that South African citizens do with an ID?
Well, the 2 things we have mentioned is impossible for them to happen. The banks and the what you call, the IEC, that you can't do if you don't have an ID on the National Population Register. All the banks in South Africa are now directly linked to the National Population Register. They don't even have to phone Home Affairs and ask. When you open an account, they go directly in there, and then all your details appear. The IEC meets with Home Affairs officials on a monthly basis with the voters' roll to remove those who have passed on and put in those who have registered, who have just turned 16. All of them have to be there on the National Population Register. So that cannot happen. Having said so, Erin, Thabo's mother happened to have gone through the same thing. Thabo's mother was born in 1965. She was never registered until she was 37 years old, because she said her own mother had no time because she was working as a domestic worker, and the employers were refusing her to move. She had no single day on which she could leave the employer's place, take Thabo to Home Affairs to register for that whole period, for 37 years. Now, when she was 37, in May that year, when she turned 37, that's 2002, having been born in 1965, her mother passed on. Then her aunt took over, and within 2 months, her aunt was already at Home Affairs to register her. That's why she's now Mabasa, because the aunt was Mabasa. So she dropped the Bester name, which is there in Baragwanath Hospital when she gave birth to Thabo. As Macy Bester, she became Macy Mabasa. And then from there, she decided, what about my children? Because she had 3 other children. Then she also registered them as Mabasa also, after her aunt being the younger sister of the mother who passed on. Then only Thabo Bester was not registered.
I was going to say, is there a Thabo Mabasa registered then?
No, there's no Thabo Mabasa. It doesn't exist. And there's no Thabo Bester on the National Population Register. And she gave a simple explanation that at the time, my mother passed on, and my aunt went to register me, and I also registered my children. Thabo was already gone. He had disappeared. When we check with the school, that's the time when he disappeared also from the school, after having completed grade 5.
So you haven't answered, and that's all very helpful information. I mean, it's quite a lot to keep tabs on, so we both have all our notes up in front of us. But one of the aspects of my question was whether you're confident that Thabo Bester, as we know him, didn't use other fraudulent South African IDs, which we know from some of the sting operations that Home Affairs and the authorities have been involved in, happen, to navigate life with pseudonyms. Are you able to say whether you know for certain he has or hasn't done that? And are you looking into it as Home Affairs?
Well, look, if you navigate through life, what are you doing? You're talking about going to school, going to SASA, going to the bank, registering a company,
applying for a job,
all that.
maybe applying for a job.
Yes,
sometimes you need ID
job
to get into a bar.
Well,
if you get a driver's license.
Yes, driver's license, all those are registered with the National Population Register. It's the onus lie on those people to know. We are the custodians of identities of people. Yes. And if you want to know an identity of a person, but I must confess, others just do get careless and take what they are given. And they're given an ID. If your ID does not exist on the National Population Register, it's not an ID, by the way. I must emphasize that.
It's a piece of plastic.
Yes, exactly. It's just a piece of paper. In fact, that's how we came to catch that something is fraudulent. Even marriages. There are people who go to employment agencies to get a job, and they take their identity, sell them to somebody who's from another country to marry them in order to get South African documentation, because the law says so. And usually, you won't find it on the National Population Register. In the past, you will, by the way, Eric, because Home Affairs officials were getting into the National Population Register using a password. And they'll simply come when we say, but you issued this document. Why? They said, no, it's not me. He said, but it's you here. He said, my password was stolen. And produce a medical certificate which shows that on that day he was sick or with a doctor or what. So we canceled the password. We introduced a new system called BACAM, Biometric Access Control Movement, where you go in with your fingerprints.
So
any document you have issued,
yes,
it means you issue a fingerprint. You can't tell us your fingerprint was stolen. So to avoid being caught,
yes,
they just register you because they fool you. You don't know. And give you a document which basically doesn't exist.
So
because it's not there on the National Population Register.
In terms of Thabo Bester and the absence of an ID, you know, we heard in court today, for example, and this was on Newzroom Afrika channel 405, he has doubts about some of the paperwork involved in him being deported from Tanzania back into South Africa. So we're now into extradition territory and whether or not the extradition was properly administered. Are you in the process of organizing an ID for Thabo Bester linked to his fingerprints? Is that in the works?
Firstly, Thabo Bester was not... There's no extradition. He was deported because he entered the country illegally. And we were able to prove to them that this is a Thabo Bester who escaped from jail in South Africa.
How did you do that? Did you use fingerprints?
Yeah, correctional services had his fingerprints. The police had his fingerprints and a photo, by the way. And correctional service also has a photo. The only way he did not have anything is in the civil registration system. But when our officials arrived there, they did take a fingerprint for him, and it matched with that which was in correctional services and police. So there was no way the Tanzanians would have refused. Now, your next question. Now that we know about him, can we give him an ID? Yes, we can.
Will
Absolutely.
You? Are you busy with it now?
No. No, we aren't.
But you have a photo. You can get it from the police or correctional services.
No. There's something that we still need to do.
What is it?
We want to find out, can we give somebody an ID against their will? What is the law says? We have to abide with the law. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
We are ready. All I'm saying is we are ready to give him. It's going to be what is called an LRB. That's late registration of birth. Yes. Which his mother went through. When you do an LRB, you go and collect all these things. Remember, you are not known. You're already 37.
You're a ghost.
Yes. So you must go to the crash. If you ever attended crash, there must be an affidavit or a record, or you must go to a school, as we did go to Thabo school, and found it. That 28 years ago, he came here, or 26 years ago, he came here and was registered. You go and collect those. You go to church. You may go to a councillor or a chief if you are in rural areas, a traditional leader. When you have got all those, we don't give you an ID. There's a Home Affairs Tribunal. We need a group of people who sit and go through all those documents. And if they are all satisfied that, look, this is authentic, we can give this person an ID, that will be given. It means Thabo has to go through that. But we have already done half the job. We went to Chris Ali Barak Hospital. We went to the mother. We went to the school where he attended, correctional service, etc. So the tribunal can see it. But the question is, can we do it without him consenting or asking for it? I don't know the answer to that. I still have to find out.
So are you saying that Home Affairs and you as Minister are seeking legal advice on whether or not you can arrange an ID for Thabo Bester without his express consent?
We can arrange it. We can give an ID anytime. We need his fingerprint. Okay. And we need to photograph it. The question is, are we able to do that in terms of civil registration laws? I am saying I don't know the answer. Perhaps somebody knows it, but I don't want to take chances.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're being extra careful around the process of ensuring...
Well, South Africa is a very difficult country with a myriad of human rights and all that. In the past, I'm dead sure that they could just drag you and take your fingerprint and all that. But in South Africa, the South Africa of today, anything you do, you've got to be extra careful. I'll just be careful.
Yes, better safe than sorry.
Yes.
Minister, so we've spoken about IDs and birth certificates, and marriage is an interesting one. I'd like to come back to marriage because I know you had an interesting discovery on that score. But let's talk about passports quickly. What have you and the department been able to establish around how Thabo Bester and his co-accused and accomplice left South Africa?
Thabo doesn't have any document, so he doesn't any South African document, let me put it. If he's not on the National Population Register, you couldn't have taken a passport. If you take your passport, it's on the National Population Register. So when he was caught in Tanzania, the passport he's carrying is not ours.
What is it?
It's an American passport. I'm saying it looks like, because we don't know whether it's authentic, but it's written USA all over, with the coat of arms and emblems. Yes. So, in the name of Tom Kelly.
Tom Kelly? Yes. So, from Thabo Bester to Tom Kelly?
Yes.
And the co-accused? What was her passport?
The co-accused, Nandiba, has got a legal passport. Okay. Her first passport she took in 2007. because we give adult passports for 10 years. It expired in 2017. She came to Home Affairs, we gave her a new one, and underline that way, we gave her a new one because her passport is never renewed. When it expires, it's thrown away. You have got to get a new one altogether. Yeah, a totally new one. So we gave her a new one, which is due to expire in 2027 because it was given for 2017 for 10 years. Yes. And so that passport was found on her, but she has never used it across any border. Because if you use it, our movement control system will reflect that. Then the other two passports, one belonged to a doctor, Nancy. You know, it belongs to a Dr. Nancy who is said to be a friend. I've seen here. She has got some nickname or some priest name. I don't know.
Please check your notes. I will check my notes as well because it sounds like an important point.
Yes. The Dr. Ntani, I was just looking for a first name. Others call her Party or something. She has got two passports. Her first one was issued in 2012, which was due to expire in
last year,
2022. Yes, but in 2019, she went to the police and deposed an affidavit that her passport has been stolen. She didn't say who. And that's the normal procedure. You say stolen, you take that affidavit to Home Affairs, they give you a new passport. That passport is still valid, but it's no longer in your possession. So it's not of any use to you. So we issue another one. And we did so. Then on the 27th of March this year, she approached police again and deposed another affidavit for the new passport which we issued in 2019, which is still to expire in 2029. This time she was not saying it's stolen. She says, I've given it to a Dr. Nanti Magudumana, and I've also given it to TK. That's the assumed name of Thabo Bester. It's TK Ngwana. He said, I give it to TK Ngwana. Why? Because they were going to apply for me for what is called a work citizenship in the U.S. I don't know what that is, but I've asked people who know. Yes, work citizenship, they told me it's impossible. When you apply for that in the U.S., they want you in person. You can't give your documents to somebody else. But that estimate, that's what is in the affidavit, which she now deposed on the 27th of March. Then on the 6th or 3rd of March, April, she then comes and says, look, my passport is with some people, I understand they ran out of country. Please give me another passport. She applied for the third passport now. And that one has not yet been collected from Home Affairs.
Minister, do you know, is she talking to the police in terms of their investigation into what's happened here?
Who? Dr. Nchani?
Yes.
No, the police wanted to ask her when they found that somebody is carrying a passport.
Yes.
One is expired, one is still
They're all over
valid.
the show.
And they are there. They wanted to know how it happened. They have to. And they phoned her and said they want to visit her at the home. Her husband was very unhappy and said we can only meet at police station. They did meet at Brooklyn police station. And then they asked her questions. And so I believe they are still investigating because there are some things here. I wonder whether you pick up things here, which I'm picking up. You come to police, issue an affidavit and say, my passport is stolen before it expires, 3 years before expiry. You get given a new one. Then the new one which you get, you give it to a person. Coincidentally, it happens to be the person who is keeping the one that is lost.
Precisely. There's some very funny business going on there, Minister. We're going to dive deeper into that just after this break. Home Affairs Minister Dr. Motsoaledi joining us to understand some of the paperwork, including IDs and passports around the Thabo Bester matter and what's been happening this week. Do stay with Newzroom Afrika Channel 405. Minister Aaron Motsoaledi here from Home Affairs this afternoon on Newzroom Afrika Channel 405. Minister, we were talking about this Dr. Nsani and her multiple passports, which found their way into the hands of Thabo Bester and Dr. Nandipha Mangudumana as they made their way to Tanzania. You've told us that Thabo Bester had another alias, Tom Kelly, was it? Tim Kelly?
Tom
Kelly on a U.S. passport, or what you think is maybe a U.S. passport. It could be a fake. And then Dr. Mangudumana was traveling on a valid South African passport. She'd had one that expired replaced.
She never used it, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yes, she was carrying it. It's valid.
Yes.
Because, as I said, it's due to expire in 2027.
Yeah.
But she never used it in any of our ports of entry. At least I'm talking the official one.
Yes.
And there are 72, including Bait Bridge, where they say she has gone through. There's no record there. There are 72, 53 are land. 8 are seaports, 11 are international airports. None of them have got any record of this particular passport crossing there.
So did they get to Tanzania through a tunnel? How on earth did they land up there?
That's what the police will have to find out.
What do you think?
We think there are two possibilities.
Yes.
One, that they jumped the fence. Yes, illegally. Yes. Secondly, that somebody very senior, not junior, either in the police force or in immigration, because it has happened before, that corrupt police and corrupt immigration officials do cause people to cross. But for such a thing to happen, you needed a very senior person. Those are the only two possibilities. But remember, Tanzania itself, they also entered illegally into Tanzania itself.
Yes.
So Tanzania also has to find out how they got into the country. But remember, to get to Tanzania, cross the borders illegally, because they never went through any airport. They must have crossed many other countries, including Zimbabwe, Zambia, etc. And none of them know exactly that they were having people within their borders. So nobody knows.
Yet.
Yes.
Nobody knows yet. And we are hoping, as we've spoken, South Africa is a country of procedure and rule of law, that maybe we can get to the bottom of it. But what I hear you say, Minister, is that it's possible. And I'd be interested to know if you believe this is the view of the police at this point, and maybe correctional services, that Thabo Bester and Dr. Mangudumana fled South Africa with the collusion of someone very senior in police or immigration.
I say those are two possibilities.
It is one of two possibilities.
Jumping the fence or doing that. I can't think of any other third possibility.
Besides
I will
my
ask
tunnel,
that if anybody has any other possibility, they could tell us, but I can't think of any other.
I mean, Minister, you're a member of Cabinet. You work in President Cyril Ramaphosa's administration. This has been an absolute embarrassment for the President's administration and this government. How do we fix it? Are you on top of things?
Just be specific about what.
Yes. We have an inmate who manages to smuggle a corpse into his cell, escape. This is known about a year ago. He then flees the country with an accomplice, makes it through Southern Africa, as you say, possibly through several neighboring countries, and is finally not extradited, you were very insistent the word is deported, back into court, and will now return to prison. This is a convicted rapist and serious criminal.
Yeah, it will be difficult for me.
Should I elaborate more?
No, you don't
have to. It's made international headlines.
No, I do understand.
Yes.
Yes, and I know it's extremely embarrassing, yes.
It's also worrying, Minister.
Yeah, but I am not able to answer your questions because that is within the purview of correctional services and the police who arrested you.
Yes.
And Home Affairs was not involved in that. It will be very difficult for me to put details.
Certainly.
Because I may make a mistake.
No, I understand that. And I don't want you to speak on behalf of your fellow ministers in other divisions. And it sounds like either you're doing a very good job of you're making it look like Home Affairs didn't do too many things wrong in this case, or that, for as best you know, you've been able to track the paperwork to this point. And there's the snag around an ID. But as a member of Cabinet, in a country that is going through severe challenges, including law enforcement, and nabbing criminal offenders, doing so correctly by the letter of the law and ensuring that they are behind bars, Home Affairs dovetails with that in terms of record keeping, knowing who individuals are, which fingerprints match which ID document on your records. What are your thoughts about this?
I'm not sure whether I understand your question.
What is your view on what's happened?
on what has happened, I mean, the person escaping and stealing corpses and all that. Well, I could just say it's a criminal mind. I mean, the biggest question which must be answered, for instance, is how was Dr. Magudumane able to get corpses? It means somebody in the mortuary collaborated. This type of things happen with collaboration. There's no way that, for instance, to put a corpse in a cell, there's no way that it can happen without collaboration. That's the only thing I can think about. But on our side as Home Affairs, we are working around the clock to make sure that identification is as tight as possible. And we thought the beginning of the source of any human being who's found there is at birth. That's why we're opening Home Affairs offices all over. Hospitals, by the way. We started that just before COVID.
Yes.
And the biggest one of them is at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital. If Bester was to be born now, there's no way he won't be registered unless the mother definitely doesn't want it. Because we do have such mothers where is faced with a Home Affairs next to the labor ward. She says, no, I came here because I was in labor. I can't register this child. We're still going to give the name. I'm still going to consult the family for a name. And we never see them again until the child is very old. So, but we are giving an opportunity to register in hospital. The second thing, we only have 2 biometrics in Home Affairs of all the people in South Africa. It's a fingerprint and a photo. And we know in these modern times, that can easily be defrauded. So we are moving, that in the system that carries those is called HANIS, Home Affairs National Identification System. We are now moving to a new system called ABIS, Automated Biometric Information System, which will include which will have not only a fingerprint and a photo, but iris recognition to recognize you in your eye, that you can't change, a palm print, and a facial recognition. Just when your face appears, the equipment going to be able, And then, in addition, something that I've just sent out yesterday, but we've been discussing it for the past 2 years, is that perhaps the fact that children in South Africa are only required to take an ID at 16 years, perhaps is part of the problem, because in some crime scenes, you find fingerprints there, they don't match with any, because Home Affairs start storing fingerprints only at 16. We are moving the age of an ID to 10 years. And hoping that will cover a whole lot of other people.
I mean, I am also aware, Minister, that it was a time of political and an administrative transition. If you're talking 1986, onward, there are all sorts of changes that happened, and it sounds like you have your eye on more sort of digital tools to help you identify people and at a younger age. Talking about bodies, and I know it's a delicate and quite somber topic, but the corpse that was found in the cell, has Home Affairs been involved at all in trying to ascertain the identity of that person? And what do you know?
No, we don't get involved in that. What happens, because it's in the care of corrections and police, we don't have to. What happened is the pathologist who did the postmortem, because it has to be done, has to write a DHA 1663. This is a form that is filled by any doctor if they certify you dead. Without that form, Home Affairs cannot give anybody a death certificate. So we have got to get that form. Once we get it, we don't ask questions. We issue a death certificate. Indeed, in this case, that form was issued by a pathologist in Bloemfontein who certified that body dead, but he certified it as Thabo Bester because that's what he thought. It was before the DNA was done. Remember, they called him immediately on the day that they found a charred body or a body that has been burned. And he immediately did a postmortem and he thought it's Thabo Bester and issued that certificate, but with no ID. When that happens, when we get a DHA 1663 form with no ID, we can't issue a death certificate and put it on the National Population Register. We do it as a handwritten document. Yes, it becomes a handwritten document with no ID and we keep it. We also do so for all the foreign nationals in the country, because I told you their system doesn't record their death.
So are you saying...
it's only now that we are changing to a new system when we do this ABIS, where everybody who within the borders of the country will be registered, including their death, their birth, their marriage, and everything, without necessarily changing their nationality. That's the system we are busy with. So this ID, this certificate came out in the name of Thabo Bester. Since Thabo Bester is still alive, it means it's a useless piece of paper, and at any rate, it's not even on our national population register.
So why not? If it was properly done, if it was handwritten out and everything, why wasn't it logged?
I've just told you that is our normal procedure.
Okay, because you didn't have the ID.
Yes.
So if you don't have the ID, you don't get onto the National Population Register with your death either. The
Never.
whole loop is missing.
Because the National Population Register is to identify people.
And then
so,
record
because
their death.
if we don't, we put you there.
I follow.
One day the bank wants to find out, and they go into National Population Register. They found your name there, but no ID. They'll get confused. So we can't put you there.
But Minister, there is then a death.
Even people whose cause of death we don't yet know. If they have to be, their relatives are in a hurry, obviously. We give them a handwritten document. Only after finding eventually their cause of death, we give them the real death certificate, which is also on the National Population Register.
Yeah, so that certificate is null and void at this point.
Absolutely.
But there is a death missing on the basis that whoever's body was found in that cell was registered and had a register log on the South African Home Affairs system.
Sorry?
I'm saying the person who is deceased, their death presumably hasn't been registered, and it's important to identify that person and then do the proper process. You mentioned DNA tests. Are you aware of DNA being sent to be checked in order to identify whose body was used as a ruse in place of Thabo Bester?
No, it was done. DNA was done because they have to compare that body with Thabo Bester's, with the DNA of Thabo Bester's mother, because she's known, as I said. Police took a DNA and took DNA of that corpse. That's when they concluded that, oh, this is not Bester.
Yes, but then who is it?
Yeah, who is it? That's a big question.
It tells you who it isn't, not who it is.
Yeah, we don't know who he is, because that DNA won't help us. Because it has to be compared with DNA somewhere. And South Africa doesn't have a database of DNA, at least not in Home Affairs.
Yes.
We did mute the possibility of us being allowed that any time we register a baby, because we register them in hospitals now, we also take a sample of their DNA. And there were whole lots of complications.
That sounds a bit much.
Yes, exactly, about secrecy and
privacy.
That it will privacy, to say, and that is privacy. And that it will cause problems, and it will be abused, and, people will be destroyed and all that. But I understand other countries are doing that. They've got this, a DNA database where they keep their
certainly for criminals, sexual offenders, for example.
Yeah, but sexual offenders is compulsory for them to take a DNA.
Yes.
Yes.
So you could check that register, for example, to try and identify the person?
Well, you are assuming that they killed the sexual offender.
I'm saying you've got the data, use it.
Well, police are checking everywhere. Really? It's their job, not ours. With us, they were going to come if they found the name of this person and want to find out if he's on the National Population Register or the National Immigration System or on the VAS. Then they'll come. But up so far, they've not yet come. It's not our job to find out who that is. It's the job of police to investigate, because they are the investigators. With us, they will only come if they are asking for identification of some sort. And if we don't have him, just like Bester, then we'll tell them so that we don't have him.
Minister, thank you. This has been incredibly helpful, but I do want to know, Thabo Bester, and indeed his mother to a point, being ghosts almost, being these kind of recordless people floating without the relevant material or documentation. How big of a problem do you think this is?
Oh, fortunately, we don't know the actual figures, we know the percentages. On the African continent, that thing is called civil registration. On the African continent, we are number 2 to Egypt.
In terms of being the best or the worst?
In terms of being the best.
Okay.
We're number 2.
Sorry, Minister.
Why are you always thinking of the worst of us?
Well, it's been a rough week in news, that's why.
No, Egypt is number 1. They are at 98% of civil registration, because they started this project of going to hospitals before us. That's why they are ahead. We are at 89%, which means there are 11% of people out there. Yeah, people like Thabo's mother before he turns 37 or Thabo himself. So it's not something that is out of this world. It's there. There are countries on this continent, unfortunately, I must state it, but I won't give their names, who are still at 5%, meaning 95% is not registered anywhere, meaning in that country, you get born, get married, and die, and it's not reflected or recorded anywhere whatsoever. Unfortunately, that's why the United Nations organizations like World Health Organization and United Nations for Population Development and even OAU came together in what year was it? Here in South Africa, it happened in Durban. They launched something called CRVS, Civil Registration and Vital Statistics, because many do not even have vital studies and say countries must have that. And I remember we did hold a conference on the African continent. The very first year I arrived in Home Affairs, there was a conference dealing with how is Africa going to bridge this civil registration and vital statistics. They even gave it a name. They said it's a scandal of invisibility, that you are alive but you are not seen. So Africa is still based with that, but we are number 2 this time around on the best side.
On the top.
And please don't always
think I got the note, Minister. You're talking about a scandal of invisibility. I think that in some ways maybe describes what's happened here with Thabo Bester. Yes. What do you hope will follow now with the case?
So, I think it was not happening accidentally with Thabo. I mean, he was very smart. He knew that, so my suspicion is because he was 16. He fell into the hands of criminals who use young people to steal, knowing that they don't have fingerprints. The very same thing that forced us to propose now, and it's going to be an act, that we need to start taking IDs and fingerprinting at the age of 10. So I think he met those people, they used him, and made sure that he never comes to Home Affairs to register, because they know one day his fingerprints will be taken. That's what I'm thinking. It's just my theory. Yes. Because a smart person like him, who is doing the type of things they will have known that there's registration, but he avoided it. Yes. He wanted to be invisible.
So maybe not an accident of invisibility, but a design of invisibility.
I think so.
Minister, my last question to you then is based on what we've now learned with Thabo Bester and your very point about how criminal networks will leverage people's anonymity to commit crime. Is Home Affairs going to take any steps to check the identities and registrations of inmates across South African prisons in the wake of this, so we don't have the situation again?
This is what we've actually done, and we've done it on Tuesday when we met, that it behoves correctional services that any inmate they register, they must check with Home Affairs who he is. In the same way as IEC is checking with us, the banks are checking with us, SASA is checking with us, SIRA is checking with us.
Minister, my producer is checking with me to say that it's the end of the interview, but thank you so much for your time and your input on the Thabo Bester matter. Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi here with me in studio this afternoon. Very useful conversation indeed.